What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show, the home of Epic Conversations, and I'm the host of Epic Conversations 2020 Best Podcast News Award winner, 2018 Innovation Award winner given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. And I host the only online broadcast in the world for dads and fathers that's sponsored by Dove Men Care. Dove Men Care. And also co-sponsored by DAD, Central Canada's National Fatherhood Organization. And I am the board chair for the Global Food and Drink Initiative. It's a multimedia not-for-profit that showcases Blacks in the diaspora that are doing their thing in food, drink, and travel. And as always, I like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. We're broadcasting live on September 14th. And for those of you in Canada, especially in Black Canada, I hope you realize that there's an election coming up. The voting day is September 20th. First of all, have anyone already advance voted? That's one question. Second of all, have you been following the election? Do you care? Are you going to vote, etc.? I've partaken in a lot of conversations about candidates, but tonight we want to hear from some of the smartest people I know, and they're not politicians, about their thoughts on the election. What are people telling them about the election from a Black Canadian lens? So let's introduce one by one. First off, we have Dr. L. Jones. Yes, Dr. L. Jones. She is now Dr. L. Jones, officially as of yesterday. Yeah. And I was part of the celebration. The tail end of the celebration was congratulations on your achievement.
Thank you. As you can see, I mean, it's late here too, and I was teaching all day, so I'm like, I actually dragged myself up from bed. I was taking a nap.
Oh no, sorry.
No, don't be sorry, but thank you so much. Yeah, so I had my defense yesterday, and now I am a doctor. So yeah.
Congratulations. Well, we're very happy, and we're supporting you all the way.
You have been. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Next up, Sarah Onyango from Ottawa. Eyes, ears, and nose, throat, and heart of Ottawa media and Black Canadian media. Good to have you. How you been?
Oh my gosh, I'm ready for this election to be over. As you know, I work in, news media, and, I'm not one of those people out on the road, following the leaders around, but we're on the back end. So, when the footage comes in and everything, we're part of the production. So very, very long days, weekends, etc. Thankfully, it's a short election, so campaign.
There you go.
Nope, we're hanging in there until September 21st.
Okay, then you're going to go on holiday?
No.
Oh, okay.
Because chances are the full results will not be in. So we're going to be doing 10-hour days for the next week. After the 20th.
All right. Good stuff. Next up, we have Mr. Warren Clarke. How are you?
I'm well. Thanks for asking.
Good. Good to see your face. How are things in your world?
Oh, things are busy. Al, congratulations. Super proud of you.
Very good. Wonderful.
Are you in Winnipeg now? You're in Winnipeg right now, right?
Yeah, I'm there. I'm out there.
Okay. Well, I wasn't going to say anything. So, Warren, if you just want to tell our audience your transition from Ottawa to Winnipeg.
Well, I was. Thanks for letting me cut out the bag, folks. But I'm just doing. I'm out here at U of M doing in the anthropology department as a prof there. So that's where I'm out and doing there in the Midwest, or the West Side, Prairie. Sorry.
All right. So now I can say I have a representative west of the Ontario-Manitoba border. At least I can count on somebody.
There we go.
All right, good stuff. Well, folks, there's an election that's gone on. Shelley Jarrett says I've already voted. Good to hear. Let's get your thoughts first on. Do you think we even needed this election?
No.
No. I think I agree with Sarah. No, we didn't. This has come at as Sarah shaking her head. I don't want to speak for you, but I think I'm going to do some of the speaking as what you're thinking. Maybe, I don't know, but it comes at a bad time. I think it's playing with a lot of people's emotions. I think, this pandemic is, looking at the numbers in different provinces. I think that should have been precedence, not people's, encouraging people to vote. I think there's too many emotions at this point We've been going through 2 years during a pandemic where people are getting sick, people are worried of getting sick, people are worried about a vaccine, people are worried about their family getting sick, people's family members are in the hospital fighting COVID, people's family members are fighting other diseases and worried about their family members getting COVID while battling a disease, i.e. myself, a family member of mine who I love dearly. So this was definitely a political play to play off people's emotions, and we're here. It's it's election. I don't want to dominate. I think Sarah, I respectfully, I think I would like to hear from you because you're in the thick of things. So please.
Yeah. Well, when I started seeing that different provinces were having pandemic elections, and I think there were at least 2 premiers who got reelected, BC and was it in the Maritimes? Or anyway, there were 2 elections where the incumbent got voted back in, one where he lost. That was the Nova Scotia one, right? Elle knows more about that.
Yeah, that was.
So when I saw that, wait, what do you mean you're having an election? And then another one had an election. And that's when I said to myself, just watch. Trudeau's going to, he's going to call an election, seeing what's going on with these 2 people who won. And we started hearing noises early, so we started already getting ready. But just the thought, just like Warren was saying, we're already dealing with a lot. It's not just the sickness, it's the anxiety around lost jobs, lost income, and uncertainty as to when the economy is going to come back. I mean, a lot of the Black businesses around here in the Ottawa-Gatineau area, the ones that are boarded up now or that have shut down permanently as a result of, the economic hardship. I mean, that's really hard to take. And then you're having an election. About what? I'm going to stop there.
Do you wonder why this election was called, Elle?
Well, I think same miscalculation that happened here, where I think they thought that idea of, people got checks with our name on it. So, if we ask people to vote now, they're going to be happy for us because they got, we gave them money during COVID, we got them through COVID, but that hasn't been the case. And I mean, you can look back at Winston Churchill, not getting elected after World War II. People actually don't stay with a stable government often after a crisis, right? Because for everybody that's like, oh yeah, I got a check and there's recovery. This, as Sarah said, there's, tons of people out of work. I think people's objection to vaccine passports and stuff is much stronger than people understood publicly, right? So there's the ones that will come out and say it, but there's a whole lot of people that are just keeping it to themselves or are angry about it. We're seeing a lot of anger there. And then, of course, people always believe that conservatives have a better plan for economic recovery, right? So when people are uncertain, it's not actually the case. It's not borne out by actual studies, but it's a persistent myth that the conservatives are the right people to have when you have an economic crisis. So that's a factor. And then we've seen the same kind of white backlash as white people in particular. I mean, this anti-vax, anti-mask movement in its public iteration is all white people. It completely intersects with white supremacy. And that same Trudeau syndrome, people will just, are so angry with Trudeau, spreads into other areas. This is what we saw in Nova Scotia, right? Where essentially we got a PC majority in the rural areas and then NDP in Halifax and Liberals getting more or less wiped out. And of course, a lot of that was conservative, white rural backlash to BLM and all the Indigenous stuff and people wanting to restore, forms of white order. And they're tired of hearing all this stuff. So I think in that sense, it was a miscalculation. I think Trudeau thought, well, let's call it now after the pandemic, people will go for me. And I don't think it's not usually the case either. So it was just a bad call in general. And now we're probably headed for a conservative government and even a conservative majority. And why, for what? So I think just a fumble there.
I also think, sorry.
I'm not confident that it would be a conservative majority because here in Quebec, people are royally peed off for real. And it wouldn't shock me if, more liberals than expected end up losing to Bloc Québécois. Bloc Québécois, the separatist party That is not about Canada in any way, shape, or form, except for the checks that it can get from Canada to fund whatever, their separatist projects in terms of, because it's a social democrat society. So, it relies a lot on the state to fund daycare, healthcare, and everything else, right? And so it could backfire here in Quebec, because here in Quebec is also the seat of the QAnon. QAnon is huge here. I see there's some American people on here. Guys, it's here across the border, and it's in my province. And in the National Capital Region, they've been the loudest, the most vocal, and the most aggressive when it comes to protesting, out on Parliament Hill, in the street, etc., and intimidating people. So the anger that Elle was talking about, we might even get the shock of our lives and get a People's Party of Canada person, Maxime Bernier's people, who are all about white grievance and anti-government and anti-vax and pro-QAnon conspiracy. We might get 1 or 2 or 3 of them out of here being voted in as a result.
Before we go any further, I just also want to introduce another friend of Dr. Vibe to this conversation. Louis Marsh of the Zero Gun Violence Movement is joining us. Louis, how you doing?
Yeah, still standing, still fighting, my friend.
What are your thoughts about this election so far?
The election so far is going to do an injustice to the political process. Trust in the election and trust in the people that are running our country. People speak about anxiety, uncertainty, and anger. That's just the tip of the iceberg. There's a $600 million tab that has to be paid. I'm not sure who was sitting around the table with Justin Trudeau when he decided that this was the right move. Because anybody of right mind or rational mind would have told him the temperature of the land and the lack of appetite for this. And I think we're in uncharted waters in terms of the possibilities that can take place here. And it was not necessary.
Let's get a little bit more focused. What are Black Canadians telling you, if they are talking at all about this election? I'm actually, Warren, I know you had something to say. I want to come back to you. Go ahead.
I think I'll segue there. I think that's a very important topic. A lot of Black Canadians are in the dark when it comes to this election that I've come to speak to, particularly young Black Canadians. This came out of nowhere. Louis mentioned it eloquently just a moment ago. This is unnecessary. And if we think about who it was necessary for, it was white elitists. That's what it was necessary for. And those who have their ears planted to the ground for these types of social movements to happen, these elections to happen. So when we're talking about the Black community, it's those who serve in government, or those who are a part of that, or see relevance in staying connected to that, white supremacist, white doctrine way of doing things. And what I mean by that is those who are moving within that social movement, or are going to consider the relevance of this. I'm going to be very stark in saying that this is a detriment to our Black communities. Today I was watching the news, and there were one of the things I'm going to shake the tree a bit here. There's a push for women's. Oh, sorry about that. So women's women and daycare. We have to be very critical as to why these governments are pushing for women and daycare rights and women and birthing of children. One of the things I'm noticing, there's a high precedence for white women and giving birth in this country. And then optically, when we're seeing these types of commercials that Justin Trudeau is bringing out or Erin O'Toole in terms of supporting women and their childbearing needs. We're still seeing images of Black women who don't have a marriage band on the left finger, on the left wedding finger. We're seeing images of a a teenage Black girl who seems to be without partner. And these are images, still being perpetuated on TV. I think we have to be very careful, who this election is for and who it's not for. And we already know that our social capital is very low in our Black communities. And getting this information, receiving this information for many Black people is a shock. I think that I've come to know. People don't even know who they're voting for. People are not. Our Black community members don't even know what the political climate is. So it's not for everyone. This is not an election it's inclusive. It's definitely an election that's only going to serve those who are walking that beat, who feel that they're connected to this white settler Canadian ideology, and who are going to think they're going to add value to it, but knowing that this election was not for us. This election is for the white elitists, and it always has been and always will be. And we got to call a spade a spade. If we're not really prepared to call a spade on this, then we just give in to white supremacy every time. So I think we got to be very conscious who this election's for and who it wasn't for, and it's definitely not for Black Canadians.
Who wants to follow up what Warren just shared? Go ahead, El. Sarah.
Yeah. So, who this election is for or not, it's happening. And so Operation Black Vote Canada really sort of pressured all the parties, all the federal parties, to make sure that whatever next election was, whenever it was going to be, that they were going to put their words into action in terms of supporting candidates to run for whatever party, but having them run in places where they could at least stand a chance of winning, and then putting resources behind their campaigns. So in 2019, there were about 45 candidates who were Black, but there were only 5 who got elected. This time there's 60 Black candidates across all the parties, including independents. And who knows if it's going to be even less than the 5. There's at least 4 of them who are incumbents anyway. But that doesn't mean anything at all. And I don't know, I don't know if the rest of you have been tuning in at all to any of the town halls. I know Louis watched one town hall that I watched, and I'm struck by how unconvincing a lot of these Black candidates sound that I've heard. There are not many of them who seem to be 100% sort of sold on what they've been told to sell. That's another thing. You're not hearing the authenticity. And when they're pressed on what they actually would do for the Black community, they tend to revert back to sort of the general, the daycare, what Warren was talking about. The daycare, it will also benefit Black women because, as you know, and then the stereotypes that Warren was talking about, most of, Black women are single women and they need the child care so that they can go out and blah, 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 and all of that stuff. So it's a catch-22. If you're not participating, you're contributing to your own marginalization in a way, because whether you like it or not, the public funds, you pay into it if you're paying taxes, and you're not going to get your fair share, and your needs will be ignored and your community's needs will be ignored if you're not seen as interested or participating in any way at all. At the same time, you do participate, you have expectations, they're not met, you're disappointed. It's a catch-22.
I think we have to be very very careful when we talk about access, because there's access where you think you can access through the door, but even if you access through that door, you can't access information, you can't access resources. And I think we have to be very, very mindful of how, as Black Canadians, we access resources or access information in this country. As you just pointed out, I appreciate what you said, Sarah. Thank you for mentioning that. You know, I wasn't there at that town hall, but from your articulation, already it's giving me an insight that, you know, these Black candidates who are in line to, you know, potentially be elected are unaware of how to serve the Black community. So if they're unaware to give information to our Black community, particularly in our marginalized communities, you know, how are they going to access the right information to even know how to vote if we can't even get it from our Black candidates? You know, like this is problematic in itself. You know, like, and I think this is why it's very necessary at this point to then point to this election was not for us. We don't have the resources to vote. We don't even know how to vote in an election of this nature because we got to learn. We have to focus on survival right now. We got to focus on survival of our families right now. You know, especially those who are entrepreneurs or those who are, you know, have lost their job during this pandemic. That's our priority. You know, anti-Black racism is not homogenous. Anti-Black racism comes with gender, sexuality. It comes with different types of social occasions that sometimes we miss the goal on. So we have to be very cognizant, again, who this election's for. I think I'm dominating here, so I'm going to stop.
You're not coming. I was going to say the real thing that we also have to recognize is that at least for 5 years of the Trudeau government, if not more, there's been a concerted operation to pay off the Black community, right? And that has been going on at the most elite levels, that what people call sheepdogging, right? So we've had, you know, Black people essentially at the table that have made a lot of policy decisions for the whole community, and that has resulted in certain amounts of money being distributed in certain ways to certain people. And that's supposed to be what gets us to vote Liberal. And so the Black community is never actually really related to through policy. We don't actually get anything. We can't, what can we name even on like one hand that we really get? We get a couple of represented positions and we get some money. That's it, you know, and like that money is, as I always say, like sold to us as though it's like so much money, but it was like, you know, 19 million for mental health and then, you know, 300 million on loans that aren't even grants for businesses. And then the idea is now we're all supposed to fall in line and we're never supposed to relate through, well, what are your actual policies? Like, do you have a justice policy? Do you have a housing policy? Do you, you know, like, so now they're like, oh, daycare, you know, but we have not been given actual real substantive policy. And we as a community have not really pushed for real substantive policy. And then what we've had is a bargain, really, a racial bargain, a racial capitalist bargain where, you know, if we're quiet and sit at the table, some of us will get some money. And that's not really an adequate like way of doing politics to the community, but that has been the Liberal deal. And so what is going to happen after the election, if the Liberals are out of power, is it's going to be absolutely devastating in a lot of ways, because when we put our community energy not into organizing ourselves, but into asking the government for money, then when that government changes, we have nowhere to go. And we're seeing this in Nova Scotia. Everybody is freaking out. We had a Black family meeting like last week, but it's a little late, not to be rude to people, but you know, meeting after the election isn't really helpful. Like the thing's already done. And then everybody's like, oh my gosh, like they fired the entire health board. They fired the Black deputy ministers. Like, we don't know what's going on. This is like devastating. I'm like, I understand that, but that's the problem, that we continually put our political energy into, and I'm not saying we shouldn't have organizations that has no role, but it becomes our only organ. We don't have organizations and then all these other forms of organizing. We end up with like the organizations that are sort of delegated to speak for us in very controlled and minimal ways, right? So not everybody gets access to that so-called table. It's always mediated through people who then get money. And then we wonder why the Black community isn't politicized, because we don't actually have a political organizing principle. We're not organizing in our communities. Nobody's going out and trying to organize people living in housing and people living in their neighborhoods and like organizing mothers. We don't have like Black mothers collectives that are talking about what do Black mothers need, that we've organized starting nationally and also connecting locally. And like that is a huge project. But until we start doing those kind of organizing things, like not just during an election, but long far out, we are never going to have the political power we need in this country. We need to stop ceding that to a small group of people, and we need to start doing it ourselves in our communities with each and every one of us. And that is always going to be our problem, that they see us as poor and powerless and ultimately controllable. And we are not doing enough to push back on that. And we are going to get absolutely screwed if there's a conservative government, because we have nothing to withstand that. We're going to lose all kinds of funding. We're going to lose all kinds of things that people have planned on. Lots of people are going to be even further out of work, even further like without resources. And then it's going to be a long, cold winter for the next, 10 years until we get a conservative government out of power, however long it takes, just like we experienced with Harper. So we really, really, really need to learn. And now I'm dominating, but we need to organize outside elections and outside the government. We can do those things too, but we really need to get on the ground in our communities. And until we learn that lesson, this will happen to us over and over and over again.
Okay. Louis Marsh, I know that you are very connected to what's going on in the ground in many Black neighborhoods in Toronto. What do you have to say for what you're hearing right now?
I think you guys got to start using the word Mike Harris and start planning for the worst. Because I was looking forward to this election season, whether it's municipal, provincial, or federal, after the protest demonstrations that we had last summer in the city of Toronto. There was an uprising of young people demanding justice, equity, fairness, and access. And those young people came out in thousands, weekend after weekend. And I said, this is an opportunity to build on this. So you walked with us last summer. You need to start voting with us during this election season. Then out of the blue comes the call for the federal election. And was it necessary? Is this the right time? What was the purpose of it? Who was going to benefit from it? And going out onto the streets now and talking to the young people, trying to get them out. What am I voting for? Why am I participating? This is a circus of clowns. So we've lost the momentum for now in terms of a continuation of young people wanting to get involved and seeing themselves as influencers because of the way this unfolded. But somebody will tell me that this unfolded the way it was designed, right? Because they have no respect for a community. So we are gonna, like this time next week, I'm not sure where my mind's gonna be at. I'm not sure where Canada will be at, but it's not looking good. The issues are not being addressed. I was on the call on Sunday, and we couldn't get a straight answer on any issue from all the candidates across Canada. When it comes to gun violence or funding, there was a conservative room that was set up so the conservative candidates could come and answer questions. I was the first one to join that room because I had some things to ask. Guess what? Up to now, the candidate still has not shown up in that room. No conservative, they ran it outside of that room. So we didn't have access to ask the questions. And this is typical of the conservative response. Canceling out at last minute on any debates where people and community have an opportunity to question them. If that is not a sign, then what is? So I go back to, I understand what they're doing. What I don't understand is what we're not doing in terms of organizing ourselves and getting better at playing their game. For the young people, it's difficult. Yesterday, I went to do early voting in my area. There was a lineup outside with about 30, 40 people lining up to go and vote. And I'm looking at the demographics of the people there. No young people. Most of the people were racialized, like, I didn't see many white people, put it that way. I saw Somali, I saw people from India. I saw people that demographic
Mm-hmm.
in the lineup. And even when I left, they were still coming in. What's that a sign of? The dynamics are changing. The characteristics are changing. And other people are inserting themselves, and we're not.
Mhm.
We're not.
Mhm.
So come Tuesday next week, I'm not sure where we're going to be at. But I'm going to put out the warning from now. Go back to Mike Harris in the province of Ontario in 1995 and see what were the first action items that Mike Harris undertook. So all that money that was promised to the black community for community development or capacity building, think Mike Harris. So if this is not a clarion call for us to step up and get involved, engaged, challenge demand, then what will it take? Because we're still paying the price in the province of Ontario of the decisions made by the Mike Harris government when they got their majority in 1995.
Go ahead, Sarah.
With Louis, because during that era, I was a volunteer with the Harambe Center, and I remember the devastation when the youth programs were cut at the center, and all of a sudden, poof, the kids are out there on the street and with nowhere to go, no funding for the after school programs, the support, even the programs for newcomers, you know, and to this day, I'm sure there are families that were set back for, the next, decades after that. So, every election you don't get involved in, but it has to start at the grassroots level, and it has to start young with our young people. The problem is when you've got, the parents that are working the 2-3 jobs because the economic situation is such that that's what they have to do to keep food on the table, etc. Where are you going to find the time, the energy to, do that civic education in your house? That's the problem. I think it was Warren who was talking about, we're just constantly in survival mode. We're catching up and we're surviving. So there's no sort of room to breathe, to sit down, to even organize properly. Where are you going to find the energy after you've expended all that energy just trying to live in this country that is hostile to you as a Black person, that doesn't even treat you like you're a whole human being? How?
Yeah.
Where do you find it?
As one of my mentors, D. Chansonberry, said to me at the end of the year last year, he said to me, Dr. Vibe, I want to see Black people start surviving and start thriving. What is it going to take for us to thrive? Before we go, I do. So, Luke, I want to bring up the article that L. Jones shared with me, because a lot of people may not even know about this article. I know that Louis does. I know that Sarah does. I know that Elle does. I don't know if Warren does, but Luke, can you bring up it's in the link? So people may not know this, but Ms. Selena Cesar Chavons says that she will be voting conservative for the conservative representative in her riding. This has caused a firestorm. This has probably been the most interesting, the most significant part of news that the media has covered, the general media has covered. They haven't gone out and talked to Black people in communities, but this is what that's being highlighted on in regards to Black Canada, in regards to this election. So for those of you who know about the story, and maybe Warren, who you don't know about the story. Oh, Warren. Okay, Warren, go ahead, Warren. Go for it. Go ahead, Warren.
I listen. Like, I'm not surprised. I didn't see this till now. I'm not.
That's why I'm glad you're coming in first.
Today, was it Raybould? What's her name? Sorry,
Jody.
Yeah.
Jody Raybould. She just so happened to release her book today.
Just happened.
Just so happened. She was on Global News, and she was doing an interview about her book, and the news reporter respectfully asked her the question: did you drop your book, or did you release your book on, a week before the election? She stuttered. She was, and then it's not me making fun of her. This is what actually happened. Go look at the tape, right?
Yeah.
And then she got very political and gave a very respectful and political sounding answer, which was no, this was planned before, and yada yada yada. Okay. Selena, respectfully, I've never met her. I've heard some great things about her. I have nothing bad to say anything about her, but we all know that she left the Liberal Party with a bad taste in her mouth, and it's not saying it's her fault. I don't know the ins and outs. I'm not even going down that road. But for two previous Liberal associates, we'll call them, who are no longer Liberal, let's just qualify that, who are going on record to either release a book and have some not so kind things to say in her book about Justin Trudeau, and then you have Selena saying publicly that she's going to vote Conservative. It just shows this is payback, I think, to some degree. I also think that we're also, from optically and what I read briefly, and Elle, please enlighten us, because you shared this article. We also have to think of social class, because for you to vote Conservative, I heard someone say to me the other day, they said, you only vote Liberal because you don't have money. You vote Conservative because you're rich, right? Or you have a higher socioeconomic status. Not saying I side with that statement, but that's what was said to me. We have to, also consider Selena is of a higher socioeconomic status. Like in the life I lead, I'm very humble and blessed and understand where I situate myself, and the privilege I have. So I have to also consider what's a good idea for me in my voting rights. I think we have to also consider these things when people are going public and saying who they're voting for. So I think it's not just one thing. I think there's multiple things behind and what's driving these people to say publicly why they're voting. And it seems that I don't know what Rabel's going to vote. I'm pretty sure she's not going to vote Liberal. We can say that for certain. But I would like to hear Elle and Sarah, I see your hand up.
So before the people jump in on this, I know Selena. I've met her once or twice. Actually, I interviewed her on my platform many, many years ago before she got involved in politics. And I'll put it out there. If she would like to come on this program and talk a little bit further about it, the invitation is out there. So if anyone knows her, tell her the mic is open. I also want to put up the comment by Sophia Jacob. Can you put that up again, Luke? She was saying, just read the article. Many things she noted in the article are true. Where is the funds that the Black community has been promised? Even if they were verbally awarded, has the money hit the bank? To my knowledge, they haven't. So that is an answer to the question. Sarah, go ahead.
Very quick comment, and I'll let Elle talk. Originally, I wasn't even going to comment, but when I first saw this, I was like, oh, give me a break. Really? Right now? Are you serious? Hate the guy or whatever, but... And then I looked at who the Conservative candidate is, and then who the Liberal candidate is. The Conservative candidate is a woman of color, Maliha Shaheen, in Whitby, and Ryan Turnbull, the Liberal, is a white guy again. So that may have sort of also entered into the equation. I'm just saying, something to consider.
I think, though, I also thought, and I thought that was going to be how she'd walk it back, except for she showed up wearing blue in the interview and was like, I'm wearing blue. So she didn't simply say, I like the local candidate, so I would vote for this person, which is a valid thing. If you're like, I'm not normally this party, but I have a great local candidate, they actually connect to the community, fine. But she actually wore blue and said, I'm wearing blue for a reason. So it went far beyond just, I like my local candidate, and into the realms of like, I am a conservative. I personally think, and again, I don't know the woman, I honestly think she wanted to respond to what happened at the debate, and saying the same thing over and over again is not newsworthy. So we already know how she feels about Trudeau. The only way to get to the news shows was to escalate. So she escalated through, I'm going to vote conservative. And I don't think that she necessarily calculated what this means for her personal brand. And politics shouldn't be about branding, but we know it is. And if we look at the people that are like the big fans of Selena, it's also the same people who want government funding. So I don't really understand how that works out for you when you're senior EDI advisor. You've acknowledged at Queen's University, which I just graduated from, you've acknowledged that the Conservative Party has literally no plan on anti-racism and equity. Your literal job is to do equity work, but you're like, I'm going to vote for this party. So where are your principles? I suppose I could say, I mean, one thing I've always wanted to hear from Selena and every Black MP is people always seem to tell us about they did this work on justice and did this and can't name a bill or a policy or things that they passed. So, you know, when they're like, oh, she did so much work on mental health and justice, when? I don't remember her helping a lick on Abdul. I can say that not a single Black MP would even send a tweet for us when we were fighting that deportation because they were too scared to break ranks against each other. So now when we say, well, the things she's saying about the Liberal Party are true, yeah, we were saying those things too in 2015, 2016, 2017, and we were treated as crazy. We were being ridiculous. And then when you leave the Liberal Party, all of a sudden Trudeau's the worst POS in the world, which, like, I already told you, but you won't even talk, like, you won't even talk to the Black community about why. When people are asking questions, there was a huge, we shouldn't dare to ask. And now suddenly Trudeau's the worst person in the world. But I'm like, some of us knew that the Liberal government wasn't working for us, spoke out about it, and took the kind of heat you can imagine that you always take. So when we're talking about the funding in the community, this is Ahmed Hussein, a Black minister who, again, some of us challenged, and people did not like that. So I think we also have to admit as a Black community that when people speak some truths about power and money in this community, people get so angry and try and like just beat you down to the ground. And then when the consequences of that come true 2 and 3 years later, people throw up their hands and say, what were we supposed to do? Well, you were supposed to ask the questions. So I am also not surprised by this, to be honest. I'm not surprised by anybody, because if politics is not about ethics and principle and it's about power, which we know it is, then we should expect this kind of thing. My joke was, you know, when you misunderstand the personal is political, right? Like your personal feelings about Trudeau should not impact what a political vote is for a party. She does not have to like Trudeau. I don't like Trudeau either, but there are other parties. There's the NDP out there. As people pointed out, there is a Green Party led by a Black woman if you want to vote there. So why it has to become conservative is also like, nobody expects you to vote Liberal. Nobody thought you would. But why conservative other than in some kind of weird, provocative thing that I think is very ill thought out for her personally as well. Like, I don't have any objection to her not liking or voting Liberal. Like, you don't have to, right? But there are many, many other options there. So I think this is a case of perhaps getting in your feelings and in your personal kind of pride being hurt or whatever happened, and forgetting about what your actual position is and what the real consequences are of this kind of thing. I think it's very, very bad for her. And the only people supporting this, the last thing I'll say, is all these racist white men that want to use these women of color now that it's convenient and be like, oh, see, Trudeau's the most racist, sexist person. And I'm like, you don't care about racism, you don't care about sexism. You have an anti-abortion bill like on the table, and you want to use these women who should know better because they are not stupid women, who should know better than to be positioning themselves this way. And then all these opportunists, gross like white men, are just like using them as these tokens. And it's really sad to see, because they deserve better for themselves. But unfortunately, they have walked themselves into a situation where this is what they are now, mouthpieces for a racist white constituency who literally want to just be like, haha, Trudeau's racist too. So you said the Conservatives are racist. It's really Trudeau. He's the real racist, which is the most ridiculous form of dialogue possible. So unfortunately, she's going to have to own her consequences. And like, I don't dislike her. Like, I said something critical about her, which I would say about the entire Black caucus and their failure in general to like speak out on important issues. That's not just limited to her. I'm saying she was part of that, because these people are a gang and they support each other until they don't. And, you know, like, everybody wanted to support each other while they're in government. And now you're mad at that same government and we're supposed to go with you. But like, then you have to give us a bit more than what you're giving us, I think. Sorry, Dr. Vibe, I'll stop.
No problem. I know, Warren, you want to add, but I want to get Louis in. Louis, what are your thoughts?
When it comes to politics, nothing should surprise me anymore. We've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's incredible that she went public. It seemed as though it was like a scorched earth policy plan to take out as much as the Liberals as she could. But as been said by the people here, is that there were many other alternatives. that would have made sense to defend what you say was wrong with the Liberal Party. To go to conservative route, I think this is a clear indication that she's got something else coming later. Maybe running in the provincial conservative party, maybe hoping for a vote on the Senate. Like she look. I don't think she could have done this without thinking about the second shoe falling. And I'm sure there's more to it than just this. But then in terms of the signal it sends to our community, we already have difficulty getting Black people to come out to vote. And for her to make this type of move and go from liberal to conservative because of your hatred for Trudeau, without any thoughtful analysis of the consequences, there's more harm than anything, not only to her, but to us as a community. We become pawns in their game. We become puppets in their puppeteer show. And we play it out over and over and over again. And that's why my only faith now moving forward is, how do we get our young people to see something viable in this process? I might not be able to vote, but I can get my parents to come out and vote. There's ways in which they can influence the outcome. And I go back to what happened last summer in the city of Toronto, the massive protests and demonstration that have caused politicians to rethink some of the things they were doing. Now we've got to turn those massive protests last summer into massive voting. And when you see what happened last Sunday, when you see what's going on with the whole the election that we call a circus of clowns, it's difficult for me to go into a community of young people and say, well, put that aside. You should get involved. And that's going to be my biggest challenge now, because they're going to come back at me and say, well, Louis, make sense of this for me. Where am I going to have influence or impact? But I'm not giving up on it. I will be engaging the young people, and I will be talking about turning last year's walks into this year's votes and how best to do that, despite the circus of clowns.
Warren, then
okay.
Sarah.
Oh, okay, right.
Warren,
No.
go ahead. No,
So-
Warren. We'll go Warren, then Sarah.
Go ahead. Actually, go ahead, Sarah.
No, this is Sophia, and all of you. I would be interested to hear what my fellow panelists have to say about, somebody talked about cash propaganda. That was Ryan
Yeah.
O'Neill Knight talked about, yes. So the cash propaganda, Sophia's right. Where has that money gone? If it's gone anywhere at all, if it's even left the office, the desk of the person who hasn't finished filling out the paperwork so that it can be released and go through the Treasury Board and all of that business. I mean, have you guys seen anything, any movement?
No.
Especially Louis, with regard to young people, did
any
of those programs?
But that was not the
target-
intention. This was to buy votes in the Black community, to put the money out there with a long string on it.
Can I rework that, Louis, respectfully? I think
Go
it was
ahead.
a short string. I think it was a short string. Meaning, like, yeah, here's the money, but you clawed it back right so quick where you couldn't even get your hands on it. Like there were people applying. Sorry, Louis, I don't mean to interrupt you. This is the conversation we need to have, folks. For those who are listening, like, we need to be very, we need to be very upfront. We need to be blunt about what our reality is in this country. Louis mentioned it. They put that money out there for us as they're giving us a handout, and they really want to help. And then when I see who was controlling this money, there was no Black representation. It boggles my mind how it is so in our face. The white supremacy, the hatred towards us, yet we still want to side with whiteness. It is remarkable. I heard you said just now, Sarah, respectfully, she's voting for a person of color, a woman of color, POC. Oh, amazing. You know who's a POC? Jagmeet Singh. Vote for him. Go ahead, vote for him. If you really want to call a spade here, vote for Jagmeet Singh. Why conservative? Because this is another episode. Yes, we are caught in a what was it, 400 years TV show right now, folks. This is another episode of white supremacy dealing with us in a very we hate you, but we're gonna pretend we love you way, and yet we can't figure out how to organize ourselves or figure out how to say, you know what, we are at a position in life and we got to be responsible for what we say. When we come on Black Canada Talk, for example, the four of us right now are responsible for what we say. Yet we have people on power. No, I don't know Selena, again, like I said, I'm not trying to start a fire, but we got to call a spade here, who are not being held responsible for what they're saying. People are looking at people in power or who represent the Black community, who are Black, and they're taking lead from these people. It is very easy for us as Black leaders to lead our own Black people astray if we're not even being cognizant enough of how we are leading our own lives and what we're being responsible for. So if we're going to stay on the subject of Selena, it's very negligent. It's not in line of supporting our Black community. And it needs to be. We should be calling it out. We should be.
So what are we voting for then? Yes, we didn't want the election, but it's here. Like in another 5 days, we're going to the polls, etc. So, what do we want as an outcome, no matter what government gets voted in? That was a question I think Dr. Vibe asked.
Yeah, well, Christopher Lawrence says, but this is my point. Funds don't really get dispersed into what needs to be done in our communities. How can we organize and centralize for ourselves?
Centralize how? Because when I hear a lot of the quote unquote national debates that have come out of the GTA, because I've attended 3 of them, they barely mention Quebec, my province. There's never a francophone up in there, and they don't speak to the Black francophone reality, which is a reality, and it doesn't talk enough about the plight of refugee newcomers and their issues, because the mental health for those guys, people from the refugee camps and conflict zones around the Great Lakes, I'm sorry, that's not the same mental health issue as Canadian born, bred, etc., etc. No, okay, it's not the same thing. And what's going on in Quebec right now with, we've got that anti-Muslim law going on. We've got the separatists up in there. We've got the same issue you have elsewhere in Canada with non-recognition of credentials and all of that gatekeeping that keeps our Haitian professionals driving cabs and not being in hospitals where they could actually do the work that François Legault is crying about, but he's not calling out the gatekeepers of the different professional orders who are keeping us out, right? So, how do we centralize when we have so many different realities like that? And very often we don't even recognize that diversity ourselves. We talk it, but when push comes to shove, we also have to be held accountable.
Let me just read quickly 2 comments here from Stephanie. Stephanie saying, I've never missed a municipal, provincial, federal election vote. Election discussion is open conversation in the household. It starts from home. Generational, we must work collective. Government funding is short-term with strings attached. They don't want to help the community. Sophia is saying, look at every election. Each time, just before an election is called, they make a big announcement for our community. Why? Because we're a huge voting bloc. If they lose our votes, they lose our seats straight. Chris saying, Sophia, that's not true, though. We're not a huge voting bloc. We're only 3.5% of the population. And there are very few ridings across the country where we're more than 15% of the population. In most ridings, we are less than 10.
Right there, I'm jumping in right there.
Go
right
ahead.
There's an example right there in the comments right there why we can't organize ourselves. If we need to, educate our people and try to steer ourselves in the right place, what we should be doing is pulling each other aside and be like, look, let me guide you the right way. We don't need to be telling people who's right or who's wrong. We don't need to do that.
Okay.
What's the point?
Louis, any comments? Go ahead. Go ahead, Warren. Continue.
If I had something to say to Louis that I think Louis was incorrect, and this, if you want some social capital training, folks, this is it right here. Louis, I'm messaging you privately. Let's me and you talk. Let's reason. Yes, you're right, Chris. Facts matter. But why do we gotta call people out? What's the point?
Yeah, but Warren, we call people out on here all the time, though.
Well, if we're trying to empower our black community,
in all fairness, that's what we're here for too.
Our panel is different from who's listening. We're trying to empower our black community. Why do we need to call each other out? What's the point? What's the point? We sit on a panel where we're having a critical dialogue. If me talking to you, as I said 2 weeks ago, or anybody, my discussion is not to oppress you. My discussion is to empower our conversation together. If you may not agree with everything I'm saying on this panel. I may not agree with everything you're saying on this panel. But it's not rooted to oppress you.
I think that this is part of the problem, right? That as Black people, it's very hard to disagree. I mean, even after what I said about Selena, then I was like, in my mind, I'm like, oh no, she's gonna watch this, you know what I mean? And then, then she's gonna be mad. But I'm like, well, whatever. Then we can have a discussion about it, and it's how I feel. And you said it publicly. I have to own my words. But then because I kind of went off a bit. But I mean, this is the problem. This is always so hard for us, right? That when we say things, there is a consequence, particularly for Black women, and for Black women like Selena too. We know what she experienced from Maxime Bernier, right? I do not forget how much racism she directly experienced when she was in that office. I'm not discounting that, but I am also critical of what she's doing right now. And this is something I think is really hard for us as Black people, because we're not all on the same page. There are Black conservatives. There are genuine Black conservatives. My hair's sticking up. There are, very far left Black people. So when we talk about, well, we need to vote, are we all on the same page with that? Are we voting for the same thing? So it's not just about the voting. I'm going to quote Tari Ajadi, who's a really brilliant poli-sci, getting his PhD soon. And so this is in response to I mentioned we had a Black family meeting after the conservatives got in here. And he said, start building organizations that don't rely on government funding. Also start mobilizing in community to build more effective coalitions than the ones you've built. Pick a party that actually represents your collective interests and use them to create a block of viable candidates over 4 years. Fundraise and create all Black constituency associations and associated community networks. Have substantive policy conversations and start refusing to sit down with government until you have a dedicated and concise platform together. So these are just some of his suggestions of ways that are outside of our actual vote, but ways that we need to organize politically in our communities, right? And in order to do that, we actually have to, I think, have hard and challenging conversations about different political values. Many of us have been harmed in various ways. I feel like I've been harmed by people, I'm an outspoken Black woman with very radical positions, and I get a lot of harm as a result, which is why I got angry talking about the thing with conservative government, because I'm like, well, wait a minute, when I talk, I take so much heat for a lot, and it's hard. And it is really difficult for us to have these political conversations. So one thing I think we also have to do is have conversations about how to disagree, have real conversations about how to have conflict, have real conversations about once we have conflict, how do we move forward? I think these things are actually really challenging, and because we live under the gaze of white supremacy, our instinct is always to be like, oh, I shouldn't have said that in public. I shouldn't have said that in public. I shouldn't have said that in public. I shouldn't have said that about another Black person. Now I'm doing this. Now I'm doing this. And then there's a management and control that comes onto us for speaking. And I think if we want to be effective politically, we have to, as Jamaican scholars Warren said, but reasoning is a difficult process. Our great-grandparents and grandparents that were involved in decolonizing. My grandfather was one of those people, and like they would be screaming at each other in these houses because they were like trying to build a new society, and they had to argue that all out. And people would meet night after night after night and argue and argue and argue, as people know about Trinidadians, right? Just like constantly arguing. And out of that, we tried to forge something that we could do politically. So I think one of the problems in Canada in general is we don't like arguing. And then in Black Canada, we're very much, because we're small, because we're, very much under white supremacy. It's been very hard for us, I think, to have the kind of political conversations we need to have beyond like, okay, we need to vote, we need to be unified. But like, how does that happen? It's very, very difficult. So yeah, I don't know. I will say too, though, that even when we're a small percentage, those kind of things can sway ridings. I mean, sometimes elections are only won by like 1%, you know what I mean? So depending on your riding, if you're effective, you still can, but we also need to make ourselves like an effective voting presence, so that we can't be ignored. So yeah, what Tari said, I think is really important for what that organizing looks like beyond the vote. I'll stop talking now. I've talked enough.
Okay, so we're going to wind it down here because, believe it or not, we're going to be having more conversations between now and the election. So this is just the appetizer. Just sort of another comment here. Chris says to Warren, facts matter. Stephanie says, well said. Sophia's saying, I feel no way. I still feel what I said matters, and I think our community's votes matter. And the government targets our community for votes. So I believe we and our votes have power, and the government knows that. And then Chris says, Sophia Jacob, we absolutely matter. But to win and keep our issues on the table, we need to be strategic in the places where we have numbers. All right. So as we close it out tonight, gonna ask each one of you, what is your message to Black Canada? 6 days. Well, now it's less than 6 days before the election, like 5 and something sort of hours before the election, and where can people contact you? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go women first. Dr. L. Jones, you're up first. I like saying that, Dr. L. Jones. You are on mute.
Now I've done it too, and then I repeated myself.
That's all right. Go ahead.
That politics wants us to think it's about personalities, but it actually has to be about policy. So I think the first thing we have to do is, be very clear. Like, this is what we're seeing now, this kind of distraction. Like, is Trudeau mean? Is he a bad person? Is this person a bad person? Is this person nice? Would you like to have a beer with this person? And that is like nothing to do with what actually happens in politics. It's like a very effective smokescreen, right? So we have to be very clear on what policy is. Look through the platforms. Many organizations have broken these platforms down. You don't have to go and read thousands of pages. Like, if you go to the different organizations, they will have, platforms graded. Like, poverty organizations will grade the impact of poverty. Environmental organizations will grade these things. So just, you can look at the breakdown and really think about what it is that you want and need. Where are you in your life? Where is your community? And what platform do you think is going to get you there? And then also beyond that, we have to think, what isn't there and what are we going to have to organize to get there? So no platform is an all Black platform, right? Like, nothing's like great for us. So, we are always voting in a compromised way, right? There is no, Black political party that we're voting for. And we have to recognize that in the limitations of our vote and the limitations of voting as our only form of political organizing. A vote only means something if we've done the work there 4 years or 5 years or 2 years or whatever beforehand. So we also have to think, what is missing, and then do that work in between elections. So that would be my thing.
Yeah.
Dr. L. Jones.
The non-Dr. Sarah.
Go ahead, Sarah.
I would have repeated a lot of what Elle said. Make sure you educate yourself. Know who and what you're voting for. And remember, there's the candidate in your riding. So you need to pay attention to what's going on in your little piece of Canada, in your riding, because that's sort of the immediate effect that you're going to see of your vote. And then the party, for me, it's kind of secondary, because I look at, who's going to bring the employment into my riding, who's going to bring the funding to fix these damn roads out here. even though, you know, the roads are actually fixed municipally, but, you know, with all of the public-private partnership kind of stuff. And yeah, make sure that you've got all your ID and everything with you. Go to the Elections Canada website, elections.ca, because since it's a pandemic, there are different ways to vote. It's too late now for the mail-in ballot. Today was the cutoff date. So you're going to have to go in person because early voting is done. This past weekend was when you were supposed to do it. But please, yes, do make sure that you educate yourself and vote your priorities, vote your values, and just vote, damn it. Like, you know, people sacrificed so that you can have this right to do this. There are generations of Black people who didn't have this particular right. So please honor even their memory and go out and vote intelligently.
Fantastic. And Elle, how can people get a hold of you, Elle, and then how can people contact Sarah? So Elle first.
I don't know if I want people to know how to get a hold of me right now, or some people may be in my inbox.
Okay, that's up to you. That's up to you. No problem.
You can email me at el.jons@msvu.ca.
Okay, no problem. We got your back, Elle. And Sarah, what's the best way for people to touch base with you?
I host a show called co-host a show called Black on Black on CHO 89.1 FM every Saturday. So you can get me at blackonblack891@hotmail.com. And I'd like to acknowledge Sophia. Sophia Jacob is a mover and shaker in the political community here in Ottawa-Gatineau. Thanks to her efforts and efforts of people like her, Ottawa got its first ever Black city councillor in its history. So I'm just saying, it's not just the politician you see, it's the people around and behind them who help get them there.
Thank you so much. Warren Clarke, final words to Black Canada as the election gets closer, and where can people contact you?
Yeah, first off, I appreciate everyone on this panel. Sarah, I want to echo what you said about Sophia. I haven't had a moment to sit down with Sophia before, but I've seen her doing amazing things in the Ottawa community. So Sophia, kudos to you. Chris, I know you're doing your thing, so no love lost, I hope. You know, I'll build off what Ellen and Sarah mentioned in terms of educate yourself. Folks, YouTube, you know, Instagram. I'm even hearing TikTok got segments on TikTok about voting and educating yourself, or was it Snapchat? I don't know. I'm old.
No, TikTok.
Is it TikTok? There you go.
Yeah.
You know, what's important, right, is find those modes, those places or sites to educate yourself. Speak to people. I just mentioned two people on this who are just watching and sharing comments. If they're open to it, you know, Sophia, Chris, you know, it's on Facebook. Reach out to them. They're maybe more knowledgeable than me on this front. You know, even me, if you want to, you know, pick my brain. You know, the art of networking is important. It's not just defining how to do it. It's actually putting into practice. If you're not trying, you're not doing. So, you know, do for self. I'm not going to tell you go out and vote, but I'm going to tell you to, you know, use every opportunity to learn, educate yourself in ways that I've mentioned, plus more, not just ways I've mentioned. So I'll leave people with that. To reach me, I'm going to just visit my website. I'm Googleable. If you Google me, you'll find me.
All right. That's warrenclarke.ca. Warren is Google.
Wow, I gave it away. Jeez.
No worry. Final comments of the night go to Louis Marsh. Louis?
I think it's important to move forward from this whole concept that this process, a lot of my people refer to it as politics. And the way it pans out, it is a lot of politics taking place. However, the decisions, whether it's policy, whether it's programming, whether it's funding, are decided by these people. Mm-hmm. So we can continue to be on the sidelines and let other people influence the outcome of these elections. No participation is not an option for us now. It's not an option. We have to be there, whether we like it or not, because, as Sarah said, people sacrifice so that we could have this vote. Other communities have come in and they've been able to mobilize, organize, strategize, amplify their small percent so that this has an impact on the outcome of these elections. That's what we need to do. That's what we need to do. We don't all have to agree on which party or which representative, but find out who's running, at least know who's running in your riding. Compare notes, who best represents what you're about, and then you hold them accountable for ensuring that your voice is delivered in Parliament. We cannot continue to use politics as our excuse for not participating. It's not in our best interest. We have many divisions. We are a fragmented Black voice. But there's no reason why we can't find common ground in some areas and make our voice heard. Here's an opportunity. Just do it. No excuses. No participation is not an option. And what I'm seeing in the short period of time is that there's a lot more discussions. I might not like the way it's done or what is being said, but there's opportunities for us to insert our voice, and there's opportunity for us to get clarification. Politics might be a fact of life, but no participation is not an option for us as a people, as a community in 2021.
Well said. Louis, how can people get in touch with you?
I'm going to go back to Warren. I'm Googleable.
You're Googleicious. But
Zero Gun Violence .movement@gmail.com, zerogunviolence.movement@gmail.com, or you can use that email, because we've had some problems using my other King Tut email address.
No problem. Well, look, I want to first say huge thanks to each one of you for taking the time out. These are so much better than the candidates debates for some reason. I don't know why.
The Ottawa one was good though.
Well, I'm sorry.
Was.
I think that this could go along with that one, and they were equal. That's the only one that's equal. And so, folks, just FYI, we're going to be having more conversations before the election and on the day of the election. So this Sunday on Black Canada Talking, I know with Warren Dr. L, sorry. And I love saying that. And Sarah and Cesar, hopefully you'll be with us. I know we'll be talking a little bit about it. I don't know if we'll take the whole thing. And then on the night of the election, I am going to be hosting live. Some of these people will be here. Your responses.
I'm working.
Oh gosh.
I'm working the election.
Okay. Well, some of you won't be here, but maybe we'll go long enough that you'll be able to join in via phone or something through that. But I'm going to host something live the night of the election. So follow me on social media, subscribe to the channel, whether it's on Facebook or on YouTube. I'd like to thank everyone who watches live on the replay. And folks, everyone matters and every vote matters. Just want to leave it at that. As I sign off, I always like to finish with this. Live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get small to get stronger. Block assumptions, aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider, love, faith, and respect, and remember to give yourselves grace. Again, thank you to everyone who watches live. Spread the word. The replay will be on my Facebook and YouTube channel, so tell people about it, but also follow me. More discussions on Sunday and on the night of the election. So don't watch all these other channels that will not have anyone Black on it, like how they kicked Elle off a few years ago. They said she was going to be on and they didn't have her on. She'll be on, and I'm going to get other people on. So let's start the rebuilding from now. Thanks to BIA Media. God bless. Peace well. Keep the faith. And remember to give yourselves grace. See you on Sunday, folks.